What happens when a powerful CEO demands something impossible from the woman he loves? Proof of her purity before marriage. What if her bold confession shatters everything he thought he knew about her? Will the truth tear them apart, or will it bring them closer than ever before? Can a past filled with secrets and shame be forgiven in the name of love? Follow the journey of Maya and Victor as they confront their deepest fears, break down their walls, and discover that true love is about acceptance, vulnerability, and letting go of impossible expectations. Will they find redemption? If this story touched your heart, make sure to like, subscribe, and click the bell icon for more gripping journeys of love, self-discovery, and second chances. Join our community for your next emotional ride. Maya sat across from him, her fingers nervously tracing the rim of her coffee cup. The golden light from the chandelier above cast long shadows across the sleek, polished conference table, reflecting the calm atmosphere that usually filled the boardroom of a firm that was known for its excellence. Yet today, there was an unsettling tension in the air. The CEO, Victor Lawson, had always been a man of strong convictions, but she never expected this. Victor sat at the head of the table, his sharp gaze fixed on her with a mix of curiosity and expectation. His deep voice broke the silence, as steady as the walls around them. "Maya," he began, "I've been thinking about our future, about us. I want you to be a part of my life, my world. I want to marry you." A soft smile tugged at Maya's lips. The words she had longed to hear, the promise of forever, hung in the air like a sweet melody. She knew he loved her. His actions had proven it time and time again. They had shared quiet dinners, long walks through the city, late-night talks about their dreams, and even tougher moments when they disagreed. But this felt different. She met his eyes, her heart racing with anticipation. "I love you too, Victor," she replied, her voice soft but certain. Victor's eyes narrowed slightly, and there was something unreadable in his expression. He shifted in his chair, his fingers tapping lightly on the table. "There's just one thing I need to know before we move forward." Maya tilted her head slightly, sensing the change in tone. "What's that?" she asked, her curiosity piqued. He leaned forward, locking eyes with her. "Before we marry, I need you to prove something to me." Her breath caught in her throat, the hairs on the back of her neck standing up. There was a tension now in his voice, something unfamiliar that she couldn't quite place. "Prove what?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Victor's gaze never wavered. "I need you to prove that you are a virgin." Maya's world seemed to stop. The words hung in the air like a weight too heavy to bear. Her eyes widened, her mouth going dry. She blinked, trying to make sense of what he had just said. "What?" she managed to utter, her voice cracking slightly. "Victor, I don't understand." He leaned back in his chair, a casual ease in his posture now, but his words were firm, cutting through the calm that had previously existed between them. "It's a simple request, Maya. Before I can commit to you fully, I need to know that I'm marrying someone who hasn't been with anyone else. You owe me that." Maya felt the room spin, her vision blurring slightly as his words echoed in her mind. She could hardly breathe. The man she loved, the man she had trusted with everything, was asking her for proof of something so deeply personal, so intensely private, that it felt like a violation of everything she believed in. For a moment, she simply stared at him, her thoughts in turmoil. Her heart hammered against her chest, and her breath came in shallow gasps. She wanted to scream, to demand an explanation, but no words came. This was Victor. He was supposed to be different, a man who valued her for who she was, who she had become, not just the image she presented to the world. Maya had always been independent. She had worked hard to carve out a career, to build a life on her own terms. She was proud of what she had achieved. But this demand felt like a blow to everything she stood for. She felt like a puppet, her strings being pulled by someone else's expectations. She stared at him, her mind a whirlwind. She wanted to walk away, to tell him that she could never ever meet such a ridiculous request. But as she opened her mouth, something inside her made her pause. This wasn't just a battle for her pride. It was a battle for her identity. She couldn't pretend to be someone she wasn't. Not for him, not for anyone. But she had always known that love, true love, required sacrifices. Was this one of them? Maya closed her eyes, her thoughts racing. She felt like she was suffocating, caught between the man she loved and the woman she had fought so hard to become. Could she even marry a man who would ask something like this? Could she live with herself if she didn't speak the truth? She opened her eyes again, locking them with his. Her voice, steady but firm, broke the silence. "Victor, I can't give you that. I'm not a virgin, and I won't pretend to be." His expression faltered for a split second, his brows furrowing in confusion. "What do you mean?" His voice was lower now, almost as if he couldn't believe what she was saying. Maya swallowed hard, the weight of her next words pressing down on her chest. She had never expected to have to explain herself in this way, but there was no turning back now. "I'm not a virgin, Victor. I made a mistake a long time ago, and it's part of who I am now. But it doesn't define me. It doesn't change what I can offer to you. I'm here, with you, because I love you." The silence that followed was suffocating. Maya's heart pounded in her chest as she waited for him to react. The tension in the room had shifted, and she could feel the air growing heavier with every passing second. Victor sat there, speechless, his lips parted, then closed again, as if he didn't know what to say. For the first time in their relationship, the powerful CEO was at a loss for words. And Maya? She had just taken the first step in revealing the truth. Whatever came next, she knew it was a turning point. But she also knew, deep down, that the truth would be the only thing that set her free. Victor sat frozen, his mouth slightly open, but no words came. The weight of Maya's confession hung between them like an impenetrable fog. His mind raced, desperately searching for some semblance of understanding, but the sharp edges of his thoughts only blurred into confusion. Not a virgin? He had never anticipated hearing those words from her. Maya's hands gripped the edge of the table, her fingers tight with the tension of the moment. She could feel the pulse in her neck, the beat of her heart, as though it were the loudest sound in the room. The air felt thick, suffocating. She had never imagined her confession would weigh so heavily. Victor's voice broke the silence, but it faltered as if he was struggling to form the right words. His gaze remained locked on her, but there was something unreadable in his eyes now, something that made her stomach twist. Maya's heart pounded louder in her chest, and the sharp sting of vulnerability crept into her bones. She had prepared herself for the worst, but not for this. The discomfort, the palpable shift in the energy of the room, the way it felt as though she had just shattered something unspoken between them. The tension hung thick like a dark cloud, and she couldn't tell if it was his pride or his love that was crumbling first. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice trembling, though she wasn't sure if she was apologizing to him or to herself. Victor leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temple as if he were fighting off a headache. He took a deep breath, then another, trying to calm himself. His pride, he could feel it unraveling thread by thread. The foundation of the person he had always been, the man who demanded perfection and control, had suddenly been shaken to the core. His chest tightened, but it wasn't just anger. It was confusion. This was supposed to be a simple decision, a matter of fact. She was supposed to be untouched, pure, the woman who would stand beside him, a reflection of his success. But she wasn't. The quiet silence stretched, each moment slipping by with the heavy weight of unsaid words. Maya could feel her breath catching in her throat. Every second felt like a lifetime, the air crackling with tension. She had made the choice to be honest, to confess. But as she stood there in the silence, she began to question herself. Had she done the right thing? Was it worth it? Would he ever see her the same again? I didn't expect that, Victor finally spoke, his voice strained, as though the words were forced from him. He looked at her, the harsh lines of his face softened by something she couldn't place, something deep, something that caught him off guard. But his eyes were still hard, guarded. "You didn't tell me this before," he added, his words sharp, like daggers wrapped in velvet. Maya swallowed hard, fighting the lump in her throat. "I didn't think it mattered," she said softly, almost pleading for him to understand. "I thought you loved me for who I am now, not my past." She searched his face, looking for some sign of recognition, something that would tell her this wasn't the end. Victor didn't answer right away. Instead, he leaned back in his chair again, his fingers steepled together as he looked away, as if trying to collect his thoughts. "I don't know what to think right now," he muttered under his breath. His voice carried a trace of hurt that she hadn't expected. "I've been clear about my values. I've been clear about what I want in a partner." Maya could feel the sting of his words like a slap, each one cutting deeper than the last. It wasn't anger that she heard in his voice. It was disappointment. Her heart ached for him, for them. "I didn't lie to you, Victor. I just never thought it would be something you'd need to know. It's not who I am today," Maya explained, her voice growing stronger with each word, though her hands still shook. "We've built something real, haven't we? Isn't that what matters?" His silence was suffocating. Maya's eyes began to water, but she forced herself to hold it together. She wouldn't cry in front of him. Not now. Not after what she had just shared. This was supposed to be a moment of honesty, of opening up, of vulnerability. But now, it felt like she had handed him a weapon to use against her. She was afraid that the man she loved, the man she had trusted, was slipping away. Victor's hand dropped to his lap, and he closed his eyes, exhaling deeply. His chest rose and fell, but his mind was elsewhere, lost in thoughts he couldn't express. He had always been a man of power, of control. But now, Maya saw him in a new light. A man who was struggling to reconcile his expectations with the reality that stood before him. He had asked for something that no one could deliver. He had sought purity, and in doing so had forgotten the true nature of love, the way it forgives, the way it accepts. But that didn't change the hurt. Maya couldn't hold back anymore. "Victor, I've always been honest with you. I'm not perfect. I've made mistakes, but I've learned from them, and I'm not going to apologize for who I am." She wiped a tear that threatened to fall. "Please, don't turn away from me for something that happened long before you ever knew me." Victor opened his eyes, his gaze meeting hers, but his expression was unreadable. His lips pressed into a tight line, his eyes clouded with a storm of emotions. He wanted to say something, anything, but the words seemed stuck. Maya had ripped open a wound he didn't know he had, and now he wasn't sure how to heal it. Maya stood there, waiting for him to speak, to make a decision, to choose. Her or the idea of what she should have been. She couldn't make that decision for him. She had already made hers. The silence was deafening, but Maya knew it wouldn't last forever. Something had to break. Something had to give, but the question was, would it be them? The smell of old books, the hum of the campus clock tower, and the warmth of late afternoon sun spilling through the windows flooded Maya's memory as she sat in the quiet of the present. The hum of the office, the high-powered meetings, and the life she'd built for herself all seemed so distant now. Her thoughts drifted back to a time when life had felt simpler, even though, in hindsight, she knew it wasn't. It was a Wednesday afternoon, a few days before finals week during her sophomore year of college. The air was thick with the tension of impending exams, and students bustled about, most of them lost in their own world of study guides and last-minute cramming. But Maya wasn't thinking about exams. Her mind was elsewhere, drawn to the promise of a night out, a distraction from the pressure that seemed to weigh her down. She had always been a bit of a loner back then, but there was something about that night that made her feel like she could finally let go, finally be free from the never-ending stress of academic life. Her phone buzzed. It was a message from Liam, a guy she'd been friendly with for the past few months. He was charming, confident, always the life of the party. He made her laugh. He made her feel special in a way that no one else did. At least, that's what she told herself. She had convinced herself that maybe, just maybe, this was the night she'd break free from her shell, let her guard down, and have a little fun. "Come to the party tonight," the message read. "I'll save you a seat. You deserve to relax." There was something about the way he worded it. His tone was always persuasive, like he knew exactly what she needed to hear. He had a way of getting under her skin, of making her feel like the most important person in the room. And that night, it felt like she couldn't refuse. Maya didn't think much about it as she replied with a simple, "I'll be there." A decision that would change everything. The party was like any other college gathering, loud, chaotic, filled with music and laughter. But there was something different about the energy that night, something that made Maya feel both exhilarated and nervous. She found Liam right away, his familiar smile making her feel at ease. They laughed and joked, and before long, Maya had a drink in her hand, the alcohol burning her throat as it mixed with the warmth of the room. She had never been much of a drinker, but tonight felt like an exception. As the hours passed, the evening blurred into a haze. The music got louder, the conversations became more intimate, and the weight of her responsibilities seemed to vanish. She was having fun, too much fun, maybe. Liam had a way of drawing her in, of making her feel wanted, desired. She hadn't felt that way in a long time. It was intoxicating, and she allowed herself to be swept up in it. But things began to shift. Around midnight, they found themselves outside, the cool night air hitting Maya's face as she leaned against the railing of the balcony, feeling both dizzy and alive. Liam joined her, a mischievous grin on his face. He leaned in close, his voice low and reassuring. "I can see how much you're enjoying yourself. You deserve this, Maya. You deserve to feel good." His words were sweet, too sweet, like honey dripping from his lips. He was always so confident, so sure of himself, and Maya found herself drawn to that confidence. She was lost in the moment, her mind clouded by the alcohol, by the excitement of feeling alive, of feeling wanted. She didn't notice how close he had moved until his hand touched hers, a gentle but firm grasp that sent a jolt through her. "I've wanted this for a while," he whispered. The words were a catalyst for something she didn't understand then, something she didn't want to fully acknowledge. She could have stepped back, told him no, walked away, but instead, she stood there, frozen, unsure of how to handle the sudden rush of emotions that overwhelmed her. Liam's lips were suddenly on hers, soft and urgent. And for a moment, Maya didn't pull away. She didn't stop him. She didn't know how. The kiss deepened, and her world seemed to tilt as the noise from the party faded away. She could hear her heart pounding in her chest, but everything else felt distant, like a dream she couldn't wake up from. And then, just as quickly as it had started, things escalated. It wasn't forceful, but it wasn't gentle either. Maya wasn't sure where her agency went in that moment, whether she'd lost it to the alcohol or to the overwhelming desire to feel like she belonged, to feel like she mattered. She didn't say no. She didn't stop him. The rest of the night was a blur of confusion, of emotions she couldn't fully process, of things happening too fast and too overwhelming. By the time she woke up the next morning in a stranger's bed, her head aching and her heart heavy, the reality of the night before crashed into her. She had let herself be swept away by something she didn't truly understand, and the weight of it crushed her. She didn't know how to face him after that. She didn't know how to face herself. For days, Maya couldn't bring herself to talk to Liam. And when she finally did, he was different. The flirtatious charm was gone, replaced by an indifference she couldn't ignore. He didn't call, didn't text. It was as if the night had never happened for him. But for Maya, it was all she could think about. The shame crept in like a shadow, following her wherever she went. She couldn't look at herself in the mirror without feeling disgusted. Her self-worth had shattered, and the guilt gnawed at her soul. She had let herself believe that intimacy could be about affection, that it could be about connection. But the reality was far colder. She had been used, manipulated by someone who had never cared for her beyond what he could get from her. Maya turned away from her reflection that day, feeling the tears sting at the corner of her eyes. She was alone in her shame, burdened by a decision that would follow her for years. The pain lingered like a dark cloud in the back of her mind, and she carried it into her relationships, never fully able to let go of the memory of that night. It wasn't until much later that she understood what had happened. That night had been about control, about someone taking advantage of her vulnerability. She had been naive, blinded by the false promise of affection. And even though she tried to forget it, tried to move past it, the guilt, the shame, never truly left her. The morning after had felt like a blur, but as the days passed, reality slowly seeped back in. Maya tried to focus on her studies, tried to move forward like she always had. But it was impossible. The weight of what she had done, and what had been done to her, followed her like a shadow, darkening every corner of her thoughts. Each time she closed her eyes, she saw Liam's face, heard his voice, and the flood of guilt came rushing back. It was relentless, as if her soul had been marked by that one decision. And then the day came. It was a cold, overcast Thursday, the kind of day where the world felt muted, wrapped in a fog of indecision and sorrow. Maya had stayed in her dorm room the night before, scrolling through her phone, avoiding the outside world, letting herself get lost in distractions. She had made the decision not to reach out to Liam, not to make excuses for what had happened. She had tried to convince herself that it was a one-off mistake, that it would pass, but it didn't. Maya woke up that morning feeling the familiar heaviness in her chest. She had an unsettling sense of foreboding. She opened her eyes and stared at the ceiling for a long time, letting the cold morning air seep through the thin curtains, mixing with the thoughts in her head. But it wasn't until she stepped out of bed, pulling on the same old hoodie she'd worn for days, that she realized the truth. She had been avoiding the truth for so long, pretending that nothing was wrong, but today, it all came crashing down. Her phone buzzed with a message from Liam. "Hey, Maya, I've been thinking about last weekend. We should talk. Maybe this weekend?" Her stomach twisted as she stared at the message. Maybe this weekend? Her fingers hovered over the keyboard, but she couldn't bring herself to respond. She couldn't bring herself to face him again. Her heart ached at the thought. Not because she wanted him, but because she wanted answers. Answers she knew he wouldn't give her. For the first time, she realized that the only person who could heal her was herself. That day, as she walked through the campus, everything felt foreign. The usual laughter and energy of the student body seemed distant. People passed by, but none of their faces registered. Maya felt like she was in a bubble, separated from the world, watching life go on while she stood still, trapped by her own decisions. It was as though the guilt had built up an invisible wall around her, keeping her from connecting with anyone. She didn't know where to go. The library? The student center? Instead, she found herself walking toward the quiet corner of campus, where the old oak tree stood, its thick branches heavy with the weight of the coming winter. She sat beneath it, wrapping her arms around her knees, her face buried in her hoodie. It was in this quiet solitude that the tears came, unbidden, unstoppable. She had been holding them back for days, trying to convince herself that she could keep it together. But in the stillness of that afternoon, the full weight of what had happened pressed down on her chest like a vice, and she couldn't hold it in anymore. She cried for what she had lost. Not just the trust in Liam, not just the guilt of that night, but for herself, for the innocence she had abandoned, for the parts of her that had been erased by her own choices. She cried for the girl who had been so naive, so eager to fit in, to be loved. She cried for the trust that had been broken, not just with Liam, but with herself. It wasn't just a broken night. It was a broken version of her that had never truly healed. As the tears fell, Maya began to realize something she had been running from for so long. She couldn't keep blaming herself forever. Yes, she had made a mistake, but it didn't define her. It was a part of her past, not her future. But that didn't make it any easier. How could she ever trust herself again? How could she let someone love her without the shadow of this mistake hanging over her? In the weeks that followed, Maya withdrew from her social circle. She avoided the parties, the gatherings, the people who might ask her about the things she couldn't bear to talk about. She couldn't look them in the eye without feeling like a fraud, like a person they didn't really know. She kept herself busy with schoolwork, burying herself in essays and projects. She even joined a volunteer group to stay distracted, always looking for ways to run from her past, to escape from the parts of herself she had learned to loathe. It was on one of those nights, when she was sitting alone in her room, that it finally hit her. She couldn't keep punishing herself. What was I supposed to do? She didn't have all the answers, but she knew she had to begin healing. She had to forgive herself. The process wasn't easy. It wasn't something that happened overnight. But slowly, Maya began to pick up the pieces of herself. She wrote in her journal every day, letting the words flow out, even when she didn't think they made sense. She meditated, forcing herself to confront the shame she had carried for so long. Each step was a struggle, but with each step, she began to breathe a little easier, to feel a little lighter. There were nights when the guilt would sneak up on her, but she wouldn't let it consume her. She reminded herself that she had done the best she could with the knowledge she had at the time. That's all anyone could do. Through the process of healing, Maya learned that love wasn't about perfection. It wasn't about having no mistakes. It was about growth. It was about finding the strength to stand up, to forgive herself, and to move forward, even when the road felt impossible. She began to see that intimacy, true intimacy, wasn't about giving something of herself away. It was about sharing herself fully with someone who would understand and accept her, flaws and all. And most importantly, she learned that she didn't need someone else to validate her worth. She had to do that for herself first. Maya's heart didn't heal overnight, but with time, it did. Slowly, her trust in people began to return. She began to open up again, to be vulnerable, but with more care. Care for herself, care for her boundaries. And, for the first time in years, Maya truly understood the power of self-forgiveness. Victor sat at the head of the conference table, his mind swirling like a storm. Maya's confession still echoed in his ears, each word reverberating through his thoughts. "I'm not a virgin." It had been a simple statement, but the weight of it had shattered everything he thought he knew about her. For a man like him, control and perfection were the pillars upon which his life had been built. Maya, in his mind, had been part of that structure, a flawless, untainted representation of everything he valued. Or at least, that's what he'd convinced himself of. But now, everything felt different. He looked across the room at her, still standing near the door, her face a mixture of vulnerability and defiance. He had expected many things when he decided to propose to her. He had expected happiness, even excitement, but he never expected this. The truth, raw and unapologetic. His fingers clenched against the armrest of his chair, but he couldn't bring himself to speak. Maya hadn't made eye contact with him since she spoke those words. She was avoiding him now, hiding behind the walls she had so carefully built around herself. And he understood why. She had just bared her soul to him, trusting him with something so personal, so deeply painful. But the anger at himself, at the situation, was rising in him. He wanted to be angry with her, to lash out, but he couldn't. There was no one to blame but himself. Her confession had been a bombshell, but it had also opened a crack in his fortress, a crack that was letting in doubts he hadn't known existed. He shifted in his seat, trying to steady his breathing, but it felt impossible. He had always been the one in control, the one who made decisions with logic, who measured every action by results and performance. But this was personal, this was emotional, and it was something he didn't know how to handle. Victor's gaze fell to the papers on the table in front of him, the same reports he'd been analyzing just moments before. But now, the numbers on the page seemed irrelevant, empty. All he could think about was Maya. He hadn't expected her to confess this. He hadn't expected her to be real with him. The woman he had been in love with, the woman he had imagined spending his life with, had a past he didn't know about, one that he wasn't ready to face. And in that moment, he realized how much he had placed her on a pedestal. His hands gripped the sides of the table, and his eyes flicked back to Maya, who stood, still distant, still hurt. His heart clenched. How had he become this man? The man who valued purity over honesty. Victor couldn't shake the feeling that he had been wrong. Not just about Maya, but about everything he had built his life on. Was this all it took to shake him? A simple confession? His mind spiraled, questioning everything that he had been so certain of. His jaw tightened. "I didn't expect this, Maya," he finally said, his voice thick with frustration. He could feel the anger boiling in his chest, but it wasn't directed at her. It was at himself. He couldn't understand why the idea of her past had shaken him so deeply. "I've spent my life building this empire, and I thought I knew what I wanted in a partner. I wanted someone who was as perfect as I believed you were." Maya didn't flinch, didn't respond immediately. Her eyes remained lowered, her lips pressed into a thin line, as if she had already anticipated his words. "I know what you're thinking," Victor continued, his voice growing more strained. "I'm being unreasonable, that I've let my principles blind me. But this is hard for me, Maya. I've always been the one with control, the one who sets the rules. And now," he trailed off, his voice cracking as he finally let out a long breath, his frustration replaced by vulnerability. Maya slowly lifted her gaze, her eyes meeting his. There was no anger in them, no judgment, just pain. "I didn't want to disappoint you," she said softly, the words barely above a whisper. "I didn't want to ruin what we had." Victor swallowed hard, the truth of her confession settling into his chest like lead. He could see her now, really see her, not as an idealized version of the woman he had envisioned, but as a person with depth, with history, with scars. She wasn't perfect, but neither was he. For the first time, he saw her not as an object, not as someone who existed only to complement his image of success, but as someone with her own story, her own struggles. And that was something he hadn't expected. Victor ran a hand through his hair, his mind still racing. His pride had been wounded. But as the seconds stretched on, he realized that what truly hurt was the realization that he had never truly seen her. He had been so fixated on the idea of her, so enamored by the concept of perfection, that he had failed to understand the person standing before him. "I'm not perfect. Victor?" Maya's voice broke through his thoughts. "And I never claimed to be. But I thought you loved me for who I am now, not for who you wanted me to be." Her words stung, and Victor felt something inside him shift. This wasn't just about virginity. This was about expectations, about the pressures they both had placed on each other. He had built this idealized version of love in his mind, and she had tried to fit into it. But real love, true love, wasn't about perfection. It wasn't about meeting a list of conditions or fulfilling some fantasy. It was about acceptance, about seeing each other's flaws and choosing to stay anyway. Victor stood up, his chair scraping against the floor as he walked over to her. His heart was pounding, his mind racing. He didn't know what to say, but he knew he couldn't let this moment pass without trying to fix it, to understand her, to understand himself. He reached out, gently lifting her chin so that their eyes met once again. There was a rawness in her gaze, a quiet strength that broke through the walls of his own self-doubt. "I don't want you to apologize," he said, his voice low but firm. I've been wrong about so many things. But I need you to understand something, Maya. I love you. I don't care about your past. I don't care about the mistakes you've made. I care about who you are now. Who you are with me." Maya's breath caught, and for the first time, she allowed herself to meet his gaze fully, to believe in the possibility of something real between them. Victor took a deep breath, his next words coming with a newfound clarity. "I may not know how to handle this yet, but I want to learn. I want to understand, and I want to move forward. With you." Maya's lips parted, the words unspoken lingering in the space between them. There was still uncertainty, still a journey ahead, but for the first time, she felt the possibility of healing. And maybe, just maybe, they could find a way to build something stronger together. Victor spent the night in a haze, unable to shake the weight of Maya's words and the turmoil that had engulfed him. His mind raced through memories, through moments in his past relationships, through decisions he had made with the conviction of someone who thought they understood everything. But now, everything felt different. The sterile walls of his apartment, the expensive furniture, the view from his penthouse. None of it felt comforting. None of it felt right. He had been so sure, so certain of what he wanted in life, in love. He had surrounded himself with perfection, with a carefully curated world that he controlled. But Maya had shattered that world with a simple confession, one that had left him questioning everything. He poured himself a glass of whiskey, the amber liquid swirling in the glass as he stared out the window at the sprawling city below. The lights glittered like a sea of stars, but in that moment, he felt more alone than he ever had. He had built his empire on control and expectations, but it was all so hollow now. Victor set the glass down, his fingers gripping the edge of the table. The anger that had surged through him earlier had dissolved, replaced by something more profound. Regret, confusion, vulnerability. He had spent so many years demanding perfection from others, from himself, and yet he had never truly looked at the people in his life. Not really. Maya wasn't a symbol of purity, nor was she a trophy to be displayed. She was a person with a past, with experiences that had shaped her. He had never once considered that. He had only seen her through the lens of his own narrow expectations. And now, as he replayed their conversation in his mind, he realized just how shallow his initial demand had been. He thought of his past relationships, those that had ended in cold indifference or quick dismissals. He had always been the one to walk away when things didn't fit his ideal. When someone didn't meet his expectations, he discarded them without a second thought. But Maya had proven him wrong. She had faced him head-on, unflinching in her truth, even when it meant risking everything. As the night wore on, Victor found himself walking through his past like a man in a fog, tracing the outlines of his mistakes. He remembered the women he had been with, the ones who had made him feel powerful in his youth, who had fallen into his world of wealth and status. But none of those relationships had ever been real. None of them had been grounded in anything but superficiality. They had been fleeting, temporary, built on the same hollow foundation that he now realized he had been trying to build with Maya. The realization hit him with the force of a thunderclap. He had been wrong, not just about Maya, but about love itself. Victor wasn't used to being wrong. He had always prided himself on being decisive, on knowing exactly what he wanted and how to get it. But now, the certainty he once had felt more like a trap, like a cage that he had locked himself inside. He leaned back in his chair, staring into the empty space in front of him. His thoughts drifted back to Maya, to her pain, to the way she had confessed her past to him. She hadn't asked for forgiveness. She hadn't demanded his approval. She had simply been honest, vulnerable in a way that he had never allowed himself to be. She had shown him what true strength looked like, and in doing so, she had cracked open the walls he had spent years building around himself. Victor felt a pang of shame. He had been so focused on appearances, on the perfection that the world expected of him, that he had never once considered the depths of the people in his life. He had never truly looked at them, not like Maya had looked at him, with eyes full of understanding and compassion despite his flaws. In the quiet of the night, Victor realized that his love for Maya had been shallow. He had loved her because she fit into the mold he had created for her. But love wasn't about molding someone into your idea of perfection. It was about accepting them fully, flaws and all. It was about understanding that people had histories, that they carried their scars and stories with them, and that those things made them who they were. The next morning, as the first light of dawn filtered through his curtains, Victor knew what he had to do. Maya was in her office when he walked in, her eyes lifting briefly to meet his before returning to her work. The tension between them still lingered, unspoken but palpable. But this time, Victor wasn't going to hide behind his pride. He wasn't going to pretend that everything was fine, that his expectations were the only thing that mattered. "Maya," he began, his voice softer than it had been the day before, less like the CEO and more like a man who was trying to understand. "Can we talk?" She looked up, her gaze wary but not dismissive. Her face was still guarded, the walls she had put up in the wake of their confrontation still visible. But there was something different in her eyes, something that told him she was willing to listen. "I've spent a lot of time thinking about what you said yesterday," he continued, walking closer to her desk. "And I've realized something. I was wrong. About everything." Maya's brow furrowed slightly, a mix of surprise and caution in her expression. "What do you mean?" Victor sat down across from her, his eyes meeting hers with a sincerity that surprised even him. "I've spent so much of my life valuing the wrong things. I wanted you to be perfect, pure, untouched, but that was never what I needed. What I need, what I want, is you, all of you." Her lips parted in surprise, but Victor quickly continued, his words tumbling out now, unrestrained. "I've been so focused on the idea of perfection, on what I thought love should look like, that I've missed the most important thing. Love isn't about finding someone who fits your expectations. It's about accepting them for who they are. I've been unfair to you, Maya. I've judged you based on a shallow standard. And I'm sorry." Maya's eyes softened, but she said nothing. She simply watched him, waiting for him to continue. "I understand now. Your past doesn't define you, and it shouldn't have mattered to me. What matters is who you are today, and who we are together. I'm sorry for imposing that demand on you. It wasn't fair. It wasn't love." There was silence for a long moment, a thick, heavy silence. But this time, it was different. This silence wasn't filled with judgment or resentment. It was filled with understanding. Victor reached out, taking her hand gently in his. "I want to move forward, Maya. I want to understand you better. Not just the woman I thought you were, but the woman you really are. And I want to learn how to love you the right way." Maya's eyes glistened with unshed tears, and for the first time in what felt like forever, she allowed herself to truly feel in that moment hope, vulnerability, and maybe even a little love. "I'm ready to learn with you," "Victor," she whispered, and in that moment, everything shifted. The walls between them began to crumble, not because of a perfect confession, not because of a flawless promise, but because they were both willing to face the truth of each other, no matter how messy, no matter how imperfect. The office was quiet, save for the soft hum of the air conditioning and the rhythmic tapping of Victor's pen against the polished surface of the desk. Maya sat across from him, her hands folded tightly in her lap. The tension that had hung between them since yesterday still lingered, but there was a shift in the air now, something that had changed, even if it was subtle. Victor studied her for a long moment, his gaze soft but intense. Her walls, which she had so carefully erected, were still there, but he could see the cracks. She was trying to maintain her composure, to keep the vulnerability locked away, but he could sense the weight of her emotions beneath her calm exterior. He knew she was struggling, trying to make sense of everything that had been said and done. But he wasn't going to let her carry that burden alone anymore, not after what they'd been through. "Maya," Victor began, his voice quieter now, stripped of the harshness that had colored it the day before. "I know I've said a lot. I know I've made mistakes, but I'm asking you to trust me. Trust that I want to understand you. Fully." Maya's eyes flickered toward him, but she didn't speak. Her lips were pressed tightly together, as if holding back everything she had yet to say. Victor leaned forward slightly, giving her space, but also showing her that he was here, in this moment, ready to listen, ready to hear her. "I know you're afraid," he continued, his voice softer now, almost tender. "I can see it in your eyes. You're afraid of what comes next, afraid of letting go of the past, afraid that I might not be able to accept you as you are. But I need you to know something." He reached out, gently brushing a strand of hair behind her ear, a tender gesture that took her by surprise. "I'm not going anywhere, Maya. Not now. Not ever. But I need you to let me in, to let me see you, the real you, the way I should have from the start." Maya's breath hitched, and she lowered her gaze, blinking rapidly as if to hold back tears. Her voice was barely above a whisper when she finally spoke. "I don't know how to do that, Victor. I've spent so many years hiding from myself, from everyone. I built these walls because I didn't want anyone to see the mess inside. The fear, the shame. It's all so heavy." Victor's heart clenched. He had never seen her like this, so raw, so vulnerable. And it broke him in a way he hadn't expected. This wasn't the confident, poised woman he had fallen in love with. This was the woman behind the mask, the one who had been carrying the weight of her past for far too long, alone. "I don't want you to carry it anymore," he said quietly, his voice thick with emotion. "I want to share it with you. I want you to know that whatever it is, we can face it together. You don't have to hide from me, Maya. You don't have to be perfect. You never needed to be." Maya finally looked up, her eyes meeting his for the first time in what felt like forever. She saw something in his eyes then, something that wasn't pity or judgment, but love, a deep, unwavering love. And for the first time, she believed it. She believed that he could see her, truly see her, not for her mistakes or her past, but for who she was now. "I've always been afraid," she admitted, her voice breaking as she spoke. "Afraid that people would see me as broken, as damaged. I've been hiding from the truth, from the things I've done, the things I can never change. And every time I let someone in, I fear they'll see the things I'm ashamed of, and they'll walk away. I couldn't handle that." Victor leaned forward, his gaze never leaving hers. "Maya, you are not broken. You are not damaged. What you've been through, what you've experienced, it's part of you, but it doesn't define you. What defines you is your strength, your resilience, the way you've carried yourself through everything, even when you thought you couldn't. That's what I see when I look at you. That's what I love." Maya's chest tightened as she listened to him. She had never allowed herself to hear those words before. She had always been so caught up in the shame of her past that she couldn't accept the love that was right in front of her. But now, as she sat there, she realized that she didn't need to hide anymore. She didn't need to be perfect. She didn't need to carry the weight of her mistakes as if they were chains that bound her. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "I've held back from you. I've been afraid to let you see the parts of me that I hate. But I know now that I've been holding on to that fear for too long. I want to be with you, Victor. I want to let go of the past, and I want to build something real. But it's hard for me to believe that you can really accept me, flaws and all." Victor reached across the table, his hand gently cupping hers, offering her comfort. "I don't need you to be perfect, Maya. I just need you to be you. I need you to let go of that fear. And trust me. Trust us. I want to build a life with you, one that's not based on perfection, but on honesty, on love, and on acceptance." The air between them shifted again, this time lighter, more open. Maya felt the walls she had built around her begin to crumble, and she allowed herself to feel something she hadn't in a long time. Hope. Hope that maybe, just maybe, she could forgive herself, that she could truly believe in the love Victor was offering her. She squeezed his hand, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'll try, Victor. I'll try to let go of the past. But I need you to be patient with me. This isn't easy for me. It's something I've carried for years, and I'm scared that if I let it go, I'll lose control." Victor's smile was soft, reassuring. "You don't have to do it alone. You'll never have to face this alone again. I'm here every step of the way." In that moment, something inside Maya shifted. She felt lighter, like the burden she had carried for so long was finally being shared. And for the first time in a long while, she allowed herself to believe in the possibility of healing, in the possibility of love without fear, love without conditions. As they sat there, their hands intertwined, the space between them no longer felt heavy. It felt like the beginning of something new, something real, something lasting. A love that didn't need to be perfect, a love that could embrace both their pasts and build a future together. The days following their heartfelt conversation felt like a breath of fresh air. The heavy silence that had once engulfed their relationship was replaced by a new kind of understanding. A quiet, gentle connection that was growing stronger with each passing moment. For the first time in their time together, Victor and Maya found themselves free from the chains of expectation, the weight of judgment. The past was no longer an obstacle standing between them. It had become a part of their story, a chapter they had both learned to accept. Victor had changed. He had always thought of himself as someone who knew what he wanted, someone who could control every aspect of his life, his career, even his relationships. But Maya had shown him that real love, true connection, couldn't be controlled. It wasn't about perfection, about fitting someone into a preconceived mold. It was about acceptance, about embracing the imperfections and loving someone not despite their flaws, but because of them. And Maya? She had learned to let go. The fear that had once defined her, the shame that she had carried like a heavy cloak, was slowly melting away. She could still feel the weight of her past, but now it no longer felt like a burden. She had shared it with Victor, and in doing so had allowed herself the freedom to be seen, truly seen, for the first time in years. She had learned that her worth wasn't tied to her past, that she didn't need to hide or apologize for the things she couldn't change. The first time they saw each other after that conversation was in the company's private garden, a place they had both often passed by but never truly paid attention to. The roses were in full bloom, their petals delicate and fragrant in the afternoon sun. Victor waited for Maya by the fountain, his back to her, his hands clasped behind him as he stared at the flowing water. When he heard her footsteps, he turned around, his heart beating faster in his chest. There was something different in the air today, something unspoken but undeniable. Maya's heart fluttered as she saw him. He looked different, not just in his appearance, but in the way he stood, in the way he carried himself. There was no trace of the CEO she had first met, the man who had held everything together with an iron grip. Instead, there was a man who had finally allowed himself to be vulnerable, who had stepped away from his expectations and embraced the person standing before him. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The weight of their shared silence was filled with so much unspoken understanding. It wasn't awkward. It was comfortable, filled with a sense of peace that neither had expected. Victor stepped toward her, his eyes searching hers, the depth of his feelings clear in the way he looked at her. No judgment, no conditions, just love, just honesty. "Maya," he said softly, his voice trembling with emotion. "I was wrong. I've spent so much time trying to control everything around me, trying to make everything fit into this perfect idea of what it should be. But I realize now that that's not love. Love is about acceptance, about seeing each other as we truly are, not as we want to be. I was wrong to impose those expectations on you. I'm sorry for hurting you, for not seeing you as the incredible woman you are." Maya's eyes softened as she listened, the sincerity in his words washing over her. She could see how deeply he meant it, how much he had grown. This wasn't the same man who had demanded her virginity, the man who had made her feel like she wasn't enough. This was someone who had truly learned the meaning of love, of acceptance, of letting go of his own ideals to embrace the reality of their relationship. "You don't have to apologize, Victor," Maya said, her voice quiet but steady. "I've carried my past for so long, and I've been afraid to share it with anyone. But with you, I realized that I don't have to hide anymore. I don't have to be perfect. You've shown me that I'm enough as I am, and I've learned that it's okay to let go, to stop punishing myself for things I can't change." Victor reached out, gently taking her hand in his. The moment their fingers touched, it was as if everything else faded away. The past, the hurt, the misunderstandings. In that single touch, there was only the present, only the connection they had built together. It was raw, it was real, and it was something neither of them had ever fully experienced before. "I've learned a lot from you, Maya," Victor said softly, his thumb gently brushing the back of her hand. "Not just about love, but about life, about what it means to truly be with someone, not just to be by their side, but to see them, to understand them in a way that transcends everything else." Maya looked up at him, a small smile tugging at the corners of her lips. "And I've learned from you, too. I've learned that love isn't something you have to earn. It's something that's given freely, without conditions, without judgment." Victor smiled, his heart swelling with a love that was deep and unwavering. He pulled her gently into his arms, holding her close as if this moment, this feeling, was something he never wanted to let go of. The soft warmth of her body against his was a reminder of how far they had come, how much they had grown. "Maya," he whispered, his lips brushing against her ear. "I don't need you to be perfect. I just need you to be you. And I promise, I'll spend the rest of my life loving you. All of you. Your past, your present, and everything in between." Tears welled in Maya's eyes, but they were different now. These were not tears of sorrow or regret. They were tears of relief, of joy, the tears of someone who had finally let go of the past, who had finally allowed themselves to be loved for exactly who they were. "I love you, Victor," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "And I'm ready for this new beginning with you. No more fear, no more hiding. Just us." Victor pulled back slightly to look at her, his gaze filled with awe. "A new beginning," he repeated, a smile spreading across his face. "Together." And in that moment, everything changed. The past was no longer a weight they had to carry. It was a part of them, yes, but it no longer defined them. The future was open, full of possibilities, full of hope. They had both learned the most important lesson of all, that love, real love, was about accepting each other for who they truly were, flaws and all. And as they stood there, hand in hand, the promise of that love felt like a new chapter, one they were both ready to begin.